All right, what's up, everybody? Um, so actually, I'm excited to talk to you guys here. I've been to NFT.NYC for the past few years, and I want to talk to you guys, just have a conversation and let you know what's going on in a community that you're probably not really associating with Web3, NFTs, or anything like that, and that's the professional race car driver community. So I wanted to come up here is to show you how we're using some of these tools, and it's actually creating a big difference for a lot of drivers out there. So. To give you a little bit of a background, like I said, my name is Marc Lafleur. My Web3 journey, probably like a lot of you, started a few years ago. Spent some time with blockchain and distributed ledgers. Realized that I'm not a technologist and I'm non-technical, so I wasn't going to spend time in that space. Figured out about Bitcoin, Ethereum, crypto, altcoins, but I'm not a financial guy, so my trading career ended pretty quickly. Probably around 2020 or 2021, discovered NFTs and started getting a little bit closer to where I felt more at home, but I'm not a creator, so I couldn't spend too much time in there as well. And then eventually I settled and figured out about DAOs, so decentralized autonomous organizations. I'm sure you guys have heard about them. And as a founder myself, that's really where I sort of found my home, because I started looking at how people were using Web3 tools to create the businesses of tomorrow. And in my opinion, DAOs and the way that they create community and make things much more equitable are the businesses of tomorrow. So the cool thing is that ended up syncing up with my other job, which is being a race car driver. So I race in Canada in the professional sports car series. I race a Mercedes AMG GT4. And there are a lot of challenges in this sport, and I could spend a lot of time trying to explain to you the ins and outs of the sport, albeit it's very confusing. But the only thing you need to know in 10 minutes is that motorsport is incredibly expensive. It is arguably the most expensive sport out there. If you're a kid who wants to get into driving, these kids are starting at the age of 9 and 10 in karting, and parents or the kids somehow have to come up with $10,000 to $30,000 just to go karting for a season, let alone getting into an actual car, let's say at the age of 14, 16. Let's say you wanted to get into Formula 4, which is a ladder into Formula 1. You're looking at almost $250,000 a year that you have to pay to get the engineers, do all the travel. So it's a very unique sport in that sense. And the thing with it is that unlike other sports, anybody can pick up a baseball, right? Anybody can pick up a soccer ball. And what ends up happening is that I truly believe that the world's greatest race car driver will never be discovered. So when you look at Formula One, you have amazing people that are coming through, but these are kids that had certain privileges that allowed them to get behind the seat of a car. And when you look at the most raw talent out there, there's a good chance that that individual is just never going to get behind the seat of a car because they didn't have the money. And that's where I started looking at it and seeing that, wow, like Web3 actually has the ability to help make the sport more accessible. So once again, I'm sure a lot of people here aren't super familiar with motorsports. So to try to kind of loop it all together for you guys, motorsport and race car drivers are actually very similar to some of your favorite artists, whether that be music or whether that be actual fine art, in the sense that you're going to spend a lot of time if you want to be a professional at it. If this is something that you really care about, you're going to be spending all of your time outside of your job focusing on your craft. The same way an artist is either spending time in the studio or working on their skills, the same way a driver is trying to get more skill, and they really dedicate a lot of time to it. So there's a similarity there. Number two is the fact that until you make it, you're broke. So even after you've made it as an artist or as a race car driver, money is very hard to come by. And finally, you have a big disconnect between you and your community. As a lot of people have been talking about here today, there's always that intermediary. So when you look at music artists, you have a situation where they're being kind of gate-kept by their labels, and it's very similar with race car drivers as well, where they have their teams. It's very difficult for them to connect to their community directly. So there's kind of some overlaps here. And what I just wanted to share with you is how people in the racing community are actually using these tools, NFTs, DAOs, to push the sport forward and make it more accessible. So right off the bat, there's a really simple way that we've been seeing a lot of race car drivers fund some of their career, and that's just through digital memorabilia. Now, you've probably heard this in a million different ways by a million different creators, but the way that's happening in the race car space is what we're seeing is we're having drivers that are creating their own sort of digital driver's license. And this is to act as like a memorabilia sort of online digital asset. And what's happening is they're selling it to their fans. But what's creating the rarity behind it is the fact that depending on when you buy this digital driver's license, it's updating with all of your career stats. So whatever track you're at, the date of the race, and then the position that you came in. So the concept is like, imagine you found, let's say, Michael Jordan way back in the day when he was shooting hoops playing high school basketball. And at the end of the game, he's signing every single one of his games with the score on his jersey. So the idea would be that if you find a driver that you want to support early on, you'll be able to say how long you've supported that individual because it's going to update the NFT with the career stats, and you'll be able to go to someone and say, hey, look, I was with Lewis Hamilton back when he was racing 5 years, or let's say 15 years ago, and here's the NFT to show how long I've been supporting and following him. And the one thing that's very interesting about the motorsport fan base is they're very attached to their drivers because they are aware how much it costs for a driver to get out there. So that's actually been having a lot of success, and you're seeing a lot more drivers do that. Of course, drivers don't necessarily have the skill set to understand how to be using NFTs in and out and how to update this, so there are businesses coming out that are helping to support them along the way. So that's been really exciting. Another interesting one has been sponsors. So because motorsport is so expensive, the whole business runs on drivers being able to get sponsors. If anybody here watches Formula One, you see these companies spending tens of millions of dollars to get logos on the car. But this isn't NASCAR, and this isn't the 80s where you can just go ahead and charge $1 million to put a logo on the car. These drivers have to spend a lot of time pitching sponsors as to why they are a good investment and how they can drive revenue for their business. So what ends up happening, there's literally a saying in the sport, you race on Sundays, sell on Mondays. Because if you can't get sponsors, once again, it doesn't matter how good of a driver you are not going to have the opportunity to drive. So there's this endless sort of rat race to try to figure out how do you provide value for your sponsors. So the easiest way is, right now what's happening, I consider it to be a vanity metric, but if you've got a lot of social media followers, right off the bat, you're able to get a meeting with a sponsor because everyone cares about CPMs right now, right? Like, what's your cost per impression? How many, or cost per mile, whatever one you want to use. How many eyeballs can we get on our brand? But a lot of drivers aren't professional marketers, so they're struggling to find ways to add value for brands. So as we all know, there's value in data, but of course, third-party data is being frowned upon. So what's actually taking its place is things like first-party and zero-party data. So what's happening with first-party data is consensual data, and brands absolutely love this. It's a lot stronger than third-party data, and you're not harvesting it from people without their permission. So what we've seen, and this is an example of a company called ModSave, where they do a great job of providing surveys. So what they'll do is they'll provide a platform for drivers to create surveys that they can then go out to their fans and say, hey, listen, if you want, can you please participate in the survey? We've got prizes, we've got whatever it might be. And it allows them to share that information with the sponsor, and then the sponsor gets very excited and they're willing to put the money down to support the driver. Now, where this started coming into the NFT space is that there are actually a lot of crypto companies that have been sponsoring motorsport. And you're starting to see that there are a lot more people in the fan base that understand NFTs and they want to start collecting NFTs. So a way to get people to do these surveys is actually been giving out sponsored NFTs. So now drivers are going to sponsors saying, hey, listen, I can provide you with, let's say, 1,000 surveys per race. This is all people that know who we are. They want to support us. They're more than happy to fill out these surveys, and we give them a sponsored NFT, which of course then provides them token-gated access to discounts from all of your sponsors. So once again, all of this stuff is early days in motorsport. This has been happening a lot in other spaces, but in motorsport, you're starting to see the community get together and figure out what's a gimmick versus what is actually adding value. So sponsored NFTs have been very interesting. And then finally, what we've actually come across is this idea of racer DAO. So for those of you that know how a DAO operates, pretty much, it's just an online community that's managing a shared bank account called a treasury. So when you look at sport DAOs, most of them, and there are a lot of really popular ones, but most of them are focused around the idea of buying a sports team. Well, with motorsport, what we've been seeing with these drivers is that they're actually more interested in supporting the community of drivers because they know how hard it is. So what's happening is the DAO is creating NFTs that people can purchase. The money from the NFT sale goes into this shared bank account, which is the treasury, and the whole community, so anybody who owns the NFT, is now voting on sponsorships to hand out to up-and-coming drivers. So what I mean by that is that they'll launch an NFT. The money doesn't go to an individual creator. It goes to the DAO treasury. People within the DAO that own the NFT can then go ahead and see all of these sponsorship proposals that are coming from kids all over the world that want $5,000, $10,000 to try to get into karting. So of course, the hope is that as the community grows, the value of the community grows, more people get involved, and we're starting to see it now where pro race car drivers are actually getting into the community to provide feedback, insights, online coaching. Sim racing is huge. Like, if you can't get into driving, people are losing their minds right now over getting a sim racing rig, and it's quite realistic if you look at something like iRacing. And we see some pro race car drivers coming in to provide coaching to people that are in the community. So I wanted to come and share that with you guys because, once again, there's so much talk with music artists, with visual artists, with all these types of things with Web3 and NFTs, but no one's really talking about what's going on in the racing space. And a lot of this stuff is just being figured out now, but it is another great example of a new community and another industry that's adopting this. So I wanted to share that with you guys. I appreciate the time. I'm going to be outside if anyone wants to talk just, how the community is going or just talk race cars. But I appreciate you guys' time. And that's it. Thank you. I'm more than happy to answer questions. So that's it. Yeah. If anybody has any questions. Yep. What you got? I've been racing for 3 years. So actually, it's funny. So I'm a founder. We started a company out in Canada. You guys probably have ButcherBox here in the U.S. Started a company called True Local, which was similar. It was acquired, and that's the only reason to be able to fund my racing career. But me coming into it as a founder, I started seeing all these amazing drivers on the sidelines, and it made no sense. Like, these drivers were all coaching, and the first question was, "You're way better than anybody here. Why are you coaching?" And they're like, "Well, I can't afford $50,000 a race weekend to go out and race." And it kind of just opened the whole space to me to be like, wow, this is kind of fascinating that you've got the best talent that can't get behind the wheel. And then because my company was sold, I was on a 2-year pretty much handcuffed, not being able to do anything. So I spent time with a bunch of DAOs. I was actually part of Seed Club, which is kind of like this online accelerator for Web3 projects, and just started seeing the ins and outs of what the industry was doing and how they were starting to use these tools to just make things better. And we started, talking to drivers and applying it into Web3. So this is my 3rd year as a pro race car driver. Thanks. Any other questions? What you got? Yeah, I think NFTs start making a comeback when we stop calling them NFTs. So I think, ironically, there is a huge gap from any of the Web3 stuff when it comes to athletes in the motorsport space. So you have to dumb it down. You can't go out and be like, "Hey, do you guys want to buy an NFT?" Because everyone's like, "Okay, I don't want to touch that." But if you go ahead and say, "Hey, listen, do you guys want access to..." Someone was saying it a little earlier, like, "Hey, do you guys want access to come and hang out in the pits with the team? You've got this digital pass that you can just show us." They get a lot more into it. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's the most seamless community to get into, but as soon as you start calling it things, instead of calling it for what it actually is, rather than trying to call them NFTs or calling them DAOs. If you say it's, "Hey, do you want to join this online community? We have this shared bank account that we're managing and we hand out sponsorships," everyone gets excited. But of course, as soon as you start saying, "Hey, join our DAO and buy this NFT," people's eyes start to glaze over, especially in that space. So I think, as with anything, once the terminology starts to smooth out and we start using all the buzzwords, it'll become adopted a little bit more. Yep. Okay. Oh man, Need for Speed Underground 2, for sure. Absolutely. You're at EA? You know Paul Lee? Okay, gotcha. All right. We'll chat after. Anybody else? Cool. Appreciate the time. Like I said, the best part about this community is it's so inclusive, and the race car drivers are out here, and we're playing in the space. So anybody wants to connect after, happy to chat.